Okay, once again, we're back on the library, page 6, and Jody, we had some questions for you that,
Sure.
and one of them is, how much more sick leave does
Shirley could be on paid sick leave through February, I believe. The number at the start of this month was 600 hours that she had left. She's a part-time employee. She works 21 and a half hours a week. So that stretches out quite a long time.
So how much money do you need to make it to February?
So, how much money we need is hard to really nail down because Shirley could come back. She could come back 5 hours a week or 10 hours a week, or maybe she's gonna be ready to come back for full hours a week. Or she could come to a point where she says, I need to retire. And if she does that, we have an additional concern, which is her payout of unused vacation time and whatever would remain of her sick time. So the library board and I struggled with that because we thought we really can't come up with a firm figure. So the scenario that we proposed to Lonnie and the mayor was an additional $4,000 would get us through November at our regular library hours. We would bring in a temporary person on a contracted basis, not as city staff, who would cover some of the hours, and then depending on the funding that's available, we could pay our assistant librarian to work additional hours per week to try to cover the 21 and a half hours that are not covered when Shirley is on leave.
Can I ask a clarifying question before
Yes.
you go on?
Yes.
I forget things. So, given that this could go on through February, and the 4,000 really is only attached until November, given that
Yes.
we're passing the budget, what would be the plan to get from November to February come November if they're still in need?
That's a great question, and we'd have to look at it at the time. We'd have to be like, oh, where do we sit? What do we have left in terms of funding? In the last, I think it's been about 6 weeks that Shirley's been out. We pretty much used up the buffer that Lonnie factors in when she does our budget numbers. She knows that, you know, we're gonna go on vacation, or me as a full-timer, I'm gonna be on vacation, I'm gonna be sick, I'm gonna be at continuing education. And so our staff has little padded hours built in to allow them to cover that time while one of us is gone. So we basically used through a year's worth of that in 6 weeks in order to keep us open during our busiest time of year. So Dave, this has never happened before. We can't predict the future. We don't really know. The best we could come up with was $4,000 would get us through the next 12 weeks or so. And then, you know, we can hope that that would be a time when she'd be able to come back. I think a time will come in the next 4 weeks, hopefully, where Shirley has better information from her physicians and knows better how she's feeling, and she can say, I think I'll be able to come back at this time, or, you know, I don't think I'm gonna be able to come back, or I don't think I'm gonna be able to work that many days a week or those long of shifts. So
And we don't want to create an environment where she feels rushed in any way, shape, or form.
exactly,
No.
she has been a wonderful asset to the library and to the city for a long time, and she deserves every hour of sick leave that she's earned. So yes, none of this is intended to punish her or the community in any way.
And if we allocated to get you through the fiscal year and you didn't use it, it's already been established, you missed it, but if there's not a use, and
Yes.
if we put money in there, it can always be returned. But
Yes.
the mechanism right now is, so you've got 4,000 for another 3 months, I'm swagging that.
Okay,
Do we get to February for 8, or is that not?
yeah. I mean, so we, Lonnie and Bill asked the library board to look at our current budget and see what we could find. And so, line item 356, consultant part-timer, we had $2,000, and we were planning to put that towards it. And so that $2,000 for a 10-hour a week is what gets you to the reduced hours of 24 hours per week. If we had money, 2,000 on top of that, I think we could get to where we could comfortably sit at our current hours. So to extend another 3 months, yeah, you're doing the math correctly. The only thing I would say is that 2,000 is already identified within the budget in front of you, so it's an additional $6,000 is what we'd be asking for, would be to cover us through February. But if Shirley then retires, we would be unable to fill that position. Well, we could fill the position, we just couldn't pay the person, for a chunk of time because of the additional payout we'd be giving her.
Thank you for serving that up for me. So you weren't here earlier, but I was the stone catcher for the concerns that
Yes.
have raised that the hours discussed and the dollar number, it
Yeah.
seemed like the difference between 38 hours a week dropping clear down to 24
24.
hours a week
Yeah,
was a really disproportionate math
Okay.
equation, how it worked out. And so one of the concerns, and there was also part of the conversation where we talked about how other departments, how do you manage, so
Mhm.
if the front office had somebody out, some people would do overtime. We could even foresee the possibility maybe the office closed half a day on Friday or something.
mhm,
But this is like a 30% cut in hours for $4,000. It's like, wow, if we spend another 4, would it be open 14 hours more?
Right.
It seems like a disproportionate number. And so help me /us / those who are listening that have asked the questions, understand why we can't proceed, assuming the dollars weren't there and we've been working on solutions,
Mhm.
why you weren't here. But how could there be, is it really this necessary, this drastic of a hit, or could it be less? Help those understand.
So you don't see our original budget request for this year. This is the version with cuts already made. Glory probably remembers this because she was part of those conversations. But we had asked this year to increase our assistant librarian to 28 hours per week to one, reflect an issue that's been present for years, which we don't carefully address. So when staff are asked to work the afternoon shift at the library and they're there from 1 to 6, but they're actually there until 6:30 because it takes a while to close the library down. We'll have people in the building at 6. You have to get them to leave. You have to lock up. You have to shut down computers, turn things off, finish up your work. And likewise on the morning shift, you can't just pop in at 10 o'clock and boom, go. So what we look at, the library board and I, what we look at is that our current 38 hours per week open to the public requires 43 actual staff hours. And when Shirley is here, we have 41 and a half staff hours in addition to myself. The library board very much feels that my time is not best spent behind the circulation desk. My time is better spent on programming, admin work, ordering the books, cataloging, those sorts of tasks. So they are trying to push us towards that goal, and asking for 28 hours for that position was trying to help us get in that direction where I wasn't working every Saturday by myself, that kind of thing. So when we're looking at decreasing to 24 hours per week, it will take 29 staff hours to cover that. And we would be doing that with Erin's 20 hours plus 10 hours of temporary contract help. So that is trying to push us further in the direction of the goal of me not being required to sit behind a circulation desk to keep the library open. I think I understand where your concerns come from, and this is not an easy budget for any department. No one's sitting with their feet up and feeling like they have it easy. We talk sometimes at these budget hearings about the need to prioritize services in the community and figure out, put our money where our mouth is, that kind of thing. And so I can take the knocks. I feel passionately about the library and the work we do. But I understand if our current service hours are more than we can honestly afford in this community. But I think I do not take cutting hours lightly, nor does anybody on the library board. So this is truly an honest reflection of what we think we can do. We also have, our temporary contract person is going to come in and they're going to need to be trained to know what to do, and we'll need to figure out a new system. It's all very new. So Dave, I wish I could give you exact predictions and exact numbers. I don't think I can do that, but you have my, I'm very sincere when I say I think this is an honest reflection of what's possible and what's appropriate. The other thing I think about is, you know, when I have to be out sick or somebody else has to be out sick, we have to stay open. So volunteers are wonderful. They're an asset to the library. We do take advantage of them and appreciate them so much, but they cannot cover public hours. That's not what we use them for. Does that give you a little more information than you had?
It did, and you answered one of my questions, because you said we could have people work for us, we just couldn't pay them. So I was gonna ask, how could volunteers be used to help solve this? So you preemptively read my mind and addressed that. I'll make my, I guess, statement at the final. I'm still struggling with this a little bit. I appreciate what you've done, but there's one comment you made, and my mind's still not made up, just for the record. I mean, I'm hearing this, I'm weighing a bunch of things. But there's one comment you made that you said they determined that, and I'll use a word that I used earlier that you weren't here for, but it's less than ideal to have me behind the counter.
Right.
And at the time we were having a conversation about, or the thought process that led into that was, when do we get to call this an emergency and tap into reserves? Versus if we can, otherwise we have to take the money away from someplace else to reallocate it.
Sure.
And we were talking about what's an emergency versus what's less than ideal, and there's part of that, you know, he said it's less than ideal to have me behind the counter, and I get that. But I have to, in this role, I have to take the library, and anything we do there has to be something that I could say, and we would do the same thing for a police force, and we would do the same thing for the front office, and we would do the same thing for public works.
Sure.
Have done it for the police force.
And, well,
We have. We had 6 officers last year, we have 7 in this.
Well, we had a chief of police that got paid out, and we still continue to have.
well, we had Al out for surgery, and we didn't, they just worked overtime, and
And
so.
they had it in their budget to do so.
Well, we'd work overtime
But you have no budget.
if we were afforded
Yeah,
the
so-
budget to work overtime, more hours.
I've said lots, I very much appreciate your input, I'm gonna sit back and listen to others, and
No, Dave, I want you to know, I appreciate where you're coming from, and I take so seriously my role that I am, you know, I'm a public servant. I'm in charge of people's tax dollars. That is something that is always with me in my role as library director. So I take that very seriously. You will see me behind the circulation desk no matter what the scenario is, because people go to the bathroom and people are out sick. So it's not like I won't be working very, very hard for the library, no matter what. I guess, it's totally up to the city council to make a judgment call of whether these funds are available. Did I call 911 when Shirley called me and told me? No. So if that's what defines an emergency, this isn't an emergency. But I sure did call my library board and let them know what was happening. And we immediately started brainstorming on what are we going to do. This council has the authority to tell us what funds are available to us from the general fund of the city of Red Lodge.
and then go do the best you can.
But my library board will set the hours of the library as to what they think is appropriate. And I'm not trying to say that in a threatening way. And this group has appointed everyone on the library board. So hopefully you're happy with their decisions. But that is ultimately their decision to make in terms of what they think is reasonable and sustainable. That's been our big focus, is what can we sustain? We do not want to reduce hours in a small amount and then find ourselves in February having to cut them even further. So,
I have something I'd like to add to what Dave was saying. The last time that we had our meeting and we got the budget numbers, there were some new numbers. Because dispatch, which is also in the general fund, came back lower than it was projected to be. And those extra thousands of dollars were put into somebody's hours within the general fund, a contractor, And also they were added to another department, the attorney's department in the general fund. And during that time, did the mayor and clerk, Jody, had you had the conversation about the needed money within the last couple weeks? I don't know when that.
I first emailed Lonnie and Bill back on August 29th, but we did not.
August?
July 29th, excuse me, but we did not actually sit down and meet.
So,
Her
you know,
email
those
address
seem
is
to be like,
Nostradamus
those were
somehow.
kind of maybe emergencies or funds that needed, here we had a little extra money. I mean, I think that we don't have to have a 911 emergency to take some money out of the reserve. And, I mean, what are they asking for, $4,000 to November?
2,000 to November would be that.
I would actually be willing to take the 4,000 out of the reserve.
I would like to propose, so first off, my thinking on it is if we decide this is the approach we wanna do and we do it, I think we ought to address the real potential problem and we ought to approve an additional 6, which gets us through the fiscal year as opposed to November. I don't see an advantage to just hiding the problem for a couple months and hoping it goes away. That's, I would much rather, and again, I trust the board and Jody and team to do the same thing that Chief Wells did last year. And that is, we didn't end up needing it, no, we're not gonna go ahead and use it for someplace else. To be responsible, and I trust that, and I also know they're smart enough to do the public math and say, hey, if we take it and we end up using it for this and not for that, next time we go in with the request, they're gonna tell us a pound sand. So I think if we're gonna address it, we ought to address it completely so that our budget is real rather than not real. We've already heard, the city attorney has already said that she has identified $1,000 that can be used to move that. I didn't hear any other department heads jump in and say anything, pause. There is also an additional amount we have from unreturnable water deposits that we have talked about. So my question would be, for the city clerk, do we have the ability to include some of that in a budget, knowing that we still have to make a future resolution, so there's no guarantee to pass? Or do we take the mayor's approach and do it out of reserve, and then at the future time, we make a time to restock and put that 15 into reserves? I like that as I'm saying it out loud.
So you mean take it out of the reserves tonight, just make that
transfer.
Yep, and then with that 15,000, put that back into the reserve, is that?
Within the future, we would, put that back into
Allocate it to
reserve.
the-
Allocate it to reserve.
To the general fund reserve.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's doable.
What's the feeling of the council?
she just said that's doable, okay,
Yeah,
let's go.
I think that sounds really good.
Yeah, let's make a motion to that.
Well, wait, we're not
Well,
done.
we're not moving. We gotta wait till we get to that.
I recognize the desire to say, great, let's move with it. I see Mike, looking off.
I would like to, I wanna get them their money.
Yes,
I'm a part-time board member, but,
Nah.
I definitely wanna get them their money. I would prefer to see it come out of the budget. I don't wanna, I'm really hesitant to touch that reserve fund, especially if there's no framework in or any policy in on how we're gonna replace it and in what time frame.
Okay,
So,
Lonnie, can we allocate that 15,000, 6,000 or whatever to the library, and the other 9,000 to the reserves at a later date?
Well,
With a resolution,
You do it.
so we could allocate it tonight and then do the budget amendment.
I'm gonna add to our list of action items in line with the public comment before, that we as a council, I will second Micah's opinion, need to come up with a framework or a policy that talks, because we need to have a way of knowing how we are going to restock reserves. So, we've talked about an emergency versus a less than ideal. But we haven't talked about how we're gonna ultimately, a lot of people have referenced personal budgets at home, we have an emergency fund at home. And part of the conversation, at least under my roof, when you talk about taking money out of there, is not just, is this really an emergency or is it just less than ideal? But it's also, okay, how are we gonna get that back up to a comfort level as quickly as possible? And part of what I hear Mike expressing is, you're telling me about taking it out of the account, but I haven't heard how we're restocking it yet. And I think we need to have that down as an action item.
But this isn't taking it out of the account, this is taking that restricted water, 15,000 left over from deposits that were unclaimed, allocating 6,000 to the library, and then allocating the rest of that into the
And
reserve.
I
So
sure,
it's
we
actually
can- sure.
increasing the reserve.
We can do it that way with tonight. Can we take that 50, because we don't yet have a budget, that 15K isn't in the general
Short
fund yet.
answer is yes.
So what I was
Okay.
thinking the mechanism would be is that we were gonna do it from reserve and then pay back reserve in a future date. And Lonnie's
She said we could
nodding
do it
her head
every
that that's,
Whichever,
She said we could do
yeah,
it
it doesn't
either.
matter, yeah.
oh, we can do it either way?
But tonight, the easiest way would be to just decrease the reserve amount, put that into the appropriation point of the budget, increase the library's budget by the 6,000 or whatever. And then at a future meeting, do your resolution to move that money back into the reserve.
Yes,
So I'm good with that for this
Makes sense.
specific expenditure, but what about the next emergency and then
So
next
we've got-
emergency?
I think that's something we need to take.
Yeah, so we do need to take it on and make a commitment that we're gonna talk about that framework for replenishing the fund.
Just like we need to do about the vacations and sick times and retirements and all of those things that we talked about earlier that need to start coming into the budget.
So that's a perfect lead into my next question to all of the remaining department heads. Where else, and this is not a free-for-all of, hey, we identified $15,000, but where else are our margins so close and so razor thin that we are pretending and something's gonna come up and it's gonna be an emergency that we really should have foreseen or reallocated? So for instance, Jim, streets plowing.
Street, loader goes down, just a set of tires on the loader is $10,000 we don't have in the budget. We're running on that type of deal, we have a very cut budget in the streets for parts for repair, if a truck goes down, I mean, we have all those on our mind all the time, but we can't plan for. When we start cutting our budget, that's where we cut out, parts where we thought we could cut out and we hope it doesn't happen.
Yeah. Dave, I would say we tightened our belt 7 years ago. And then every year has just been,
Notches ever since, every year.
you know, hopefully everything goes fine.
We
I-
run
wait,
the
wait.
crisis management.
But many departments have tightened their belt. And
Yes, I think
many
we all
departments-
have.
And a few departments have increased by a lot. In a budget that's so tight.
So,
And it didn't help that salaries were paid out of water and sewer.
that's fixed now, that's
I
the
know,
past.
but that's
that-
why we're in the situation we're in right now.
That has really, you know, hit us hard the last 3 years, ever since the change came to the resort tax. We had 2 years running where we were promised $7,500 each year to put towards technology, but don't spend it the first year, because then you can add it to the other $7,500 and have the full 15,000 you want. That was the year that the resort tax cut was made and we lost that money. And we also lost $5,000 that we hadn't spent at that time of year when it came up in spring.
And we also talked that you missed about a mechanism that is available that's not currently in place, where we can set up a specific constrained line item account that will allow you to do some of that holdover from 1 year.
Yeah, that would be wonderful,
to
that
the
would actually
next.
protect it,
So,
yeah.
kind of thing.
we're just belaboring this. The important thing is, you've got the money that you need. We know where it's gonna come from, so you don't have to cut your hours.
Do I though? Okay, I just wanna clarify, because Dave was using the figure $6,000 for the end of the fiscal year, and that's not.
Nothing's done yet, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right, but $6,000 doesn't get us to the end of the fiscal year, we're
No,
barely
it only
into
gets
this
you
fiscal
through
year.
February.
Oh,
Yeah, we're 2 months into this fiscal
sorry,
year, so we're talking about.
so, but No, the February was because that was the end of her payout possibility.
Yes,
Only one part of it.
but if she then retired, there's an additional payout that goes in that.
But to
puts
me,
us
that's a
in
problem
that
that
situation.
exists in multiple departments
Yeah.
right now.
Absolutely.
Does,
And those can be
anyone wanna make a
fixed
motion?
budget
here?
amendments.
So moved.
Where do we move
So,
to?
so before I make the motion, Lonnie, if I look at 3525 as it stands, what amendments would need to take place? I believe you said the easier one is to transfer it from general reserves to library. Does that require an amendment to the resolution? Because there's two line items that would be impacted, I think, 1,000 and 2220.
2220 wouldn't be impacted.
No, that's.
But I think they're both general funds, aren't they?
The library's.
Okay, that's,
2220 is kind of a restricted fund that the library board has for donations and bequests that we receive over the years
So-
to use towards remodel projects.
So, oh no, it's fine, because the total requirement, within this one, I will decrease the reserve and put that into
and so
But
but
as
this
far
page
as-
is exact still.
it is, nothing changes.
I move to approve resolution number 3529, a resolution of the city of Red Lodge.
We're not there yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We still are making motions to change some of these allocations. We haven't even gotten to that part of the meeting yet.
I was gonna say, reflecting the changes we've talked about at the end of
Yeah.
that.
But we're not
I
ready
have more
to.
changes.
Oh,
I have more motions.
but wait, there's more.
I move to allocate $12,000, split equally between general fund, water enterprise, and sewer enterprise funds, to the planning department instead of to the Energy Corps Sustainability Coordinator in order to increase the city planner's hours from 30 hours per week to 40 hours per week.
So the 4,000 that's.
Correct.
Oh,
It doesn't change any of those allocations.
I second that.
The reason that I'm doing this is because Neil, the city planner, he has the education, the experience, and the skills to work collaboratively with the groups, the boards, and the city staff to influence the city's work so that it's consistent with the comprehensive sustainability plan that the Red Lodge City Council passed in December of 2018. And I think it is a good way to give the planning department, who really are involved in every single aspect of everything that we do, that vote of confidence and,
Is this all in your motion?
no, it was seconded. She seconded it, so I
This
was,
is
we were
discussion.
discussing. But that's what I'd like to see.
Did you
Any
say?
other discussion?
Yeah, so question, you said it was coming from general fund,
4,000 general fund, 4,000 water enterprise, 4,000 sewer.
how does that come from the enterprise funds?
Right now, it's allocated to the Energy Corps Vista.
But the Energy Corps Vista person was allocated thus explicitly because the savings was going to be in those enterprise funds. So how does planning come out of enterprise funds is my question.
Because they would be working on the same plan that the Energy Corps person is working on with the, tell me about the plan. What does the Energy Corps person do that is for water, that Neil couldn't do with an additional 10 hours a week?
I guess that's a question that should go to James.
So I do think we should get Neil's input on it, to see if he's willing to do that before a decision is made. It's an interesting idea, for sure.
I think too that replacing, what is Neil, 32 hours?
30 or
30.
So giving 10 hours to Neil is not the same as a 40-hour position in this role. And honestly, I am busy every single day. I work on a multitude of projects. You sat through an hour-and-a-half meeting yesterday with me, where I discussed all the status of all the projects I've been working on over the last 2 years, and it took the entire hour-and-a-half. I don't really think that you can expect Neil to accomplish what someone with a 40-hour position can accomplish in 10 additional hours. I think that's an insane ask of him. And I agree that increasing Neil's hours would be fabulous, but I don't think that getting rid of one staff person evens that out.
I don't believe that Energy Corps Vista is considered the staff person, correct? Isn't that what I was told last year? And another concern that I have is bringing somebody, a full-time worker, into Red Lodge for $12,000 a year, when we talk a lot of times at a lot of other groups that I belong to about the cost of living in Red Lodge. I think that Neil could handle the things that would be required of him, because I think that those are planning things. He's familiar with the growth plan. He's familiar with the CIP. And the things that we talked about yesterday that are left to do, I think he would have more influence with staff as far as teaching people, you know, how to recycle or conserve energy. And I think that probably his education and skills, he would be able to, you know, do the measurements that you do as far as figuring out the BTUs used and the mileage per vehicle and what our fleet gets, and measuring those markers where we want to move the needle. We always want to move the needle a little bit. I'm convinced that he could do it.
I would like to add a comment. I have a unique perspective on this, or piece of insight that I've not yet had a chance to share with the council, but I think now is a good time. Catherine was able to put together a report and kind of demonstrate how we came out money ahead from the city through her efforts with grants and rebates, and demonstrated that that was a position that in essence more than paid for itself. I agree with the concept that it would be good to get full-time. But at the time, we all had a fear, will we be able to find the next Catherine? So over the last couple of days, I've had the benefit of sitting in on the interviews, and interviewing those candidates, and I hate to be bold and put it out there, but I do think we found a candidate that I think can be the next. Now, she'll be where Catherine was coming in, she won't be where Catherine was coming out. And I would anticipate that we would be able to see those same sort of savings and returns in the future, which I would hope would lead us to the spot where we could have Neil full-time on an ongoing basis. So I have seen the value in the position, and I believe that we found a candidate. We won't be taking action on that tonight other than a budgetary approval or not. But I believe we found somebody who will, in the big picture, help get us there. So I did want to share that with the council.
Who's we?
In on the interviews was Corey Thompson, who is supervising the position, the mayor, and then I was the council representative.
I wonder too if, by making Neil full-time, if $12,000 would cover that cost, because then don't you have to pay for his health insurance?
He's
and
already full-time at 30
is
hours
he?
a week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Any more discussion at the table? We have a motion, we have a second. Roll call.
Cameron,
Yes.
Can we restate the motion, I'm sorry, just for clarification?
Move to allocate $12,000 split equally between general fund, water enterprise, and sewer enterprise funds. It's $4,000 each. It's about this, it's a little less than the allocation that the deputy, clerk has. I think it's about 20% instead of 25. So move to allocate $12,000 equally from general fund, water enterprise, sewer enterprise funds, $4,000 each to planning for the city planners increase of hours from 30 per week to 40 per week.
I don't know how we do, can I go back, ask
No,
a
we're-
question?
We started
Can we-
roll call, but
I thought James said he wasn't even sure if Neil was willing and we needed to find that out first. At least that's what I heard you say.
Right.
He did say that.
we have a motion that's been seconded,
And the roll call has begun.
and the roll call has begun.
Yes.
Dimich,
Yes.
Hoffman,
No.
Mahan,
No,
Weimer,
No.
Westwood.
No.
yeah, we can.
Having said that, I am happy to get on the board and on board with helping figure out how we can make that work through other mechanisms. It's not a slide against Neil in any way, shape, or form.
Not at all, but I think that's something that has to be, that James has to take a hard look at.
It's another position though that we had to cut last year. That was full-time at one point.
25%.
Any other motions?
We just need to.
I
Jody
move
needs
to
know,
approve
yeah.
resolution 3529, a resolution of the city of Red Lodge, Montana, approving and adopting the final budget for fiscal year 2019-20 as proposed by the Red Lodge City Council on August 27, 2019, comma, with the changes that we have discussed about, which I would like to summarize. So the first is that there will be $6,000, and I guess here's a question, is it 6,000 from reserves to library, or is it 5,000 from reserves and 1,000 from legal?
Reserves or library?
So 6,000 from library to reserves.
Whoa.
Reserve.
I'm sorry, from reserves to library. Just your way. And any other change, and the percentages of the employees. Lonnie, do you feel comfortable you have all the changes noted?
Yeah, I did.
I so move.
Second,
Discussion.
Can I just clarify that $6,000 in addition to the $2,000 the library board had identified in the budget?
Yes.
I believe that gets us through February.
Correct, which
And
is,
then
which is the
potentially-
which is the time frame that has the potential to do that. And there is, as discussed, the expectation that that would
Should
be what
Shirley
the
come
money.
back earlier?
Yeah, that it won't be used for other things, oh goody, free money.
and when the
Put
time
it
comes
in
that Shirley makes a decision, then
the
we can all
contract,
look at it again.
Salaries or split,
I'll put it in salary.
but it'll still be a contract.
More discussion at the table. Yes,
Okay.
it's time.
I would like to see some of the wording in the title changed, even though it's minor. I would like the second sentence or the second line to read for fiscal year 2019-2020 as proposed by the mayor of the city of Red Lodge and approved by the city council.
Second,
You make it an official motion.
I thought this was covered
Here's-
under
Is
yours.
this a motion on top
No,
of?
no, yours is actually a motion to amend the resolution. You can say I move because of urgent.
I move to amend resolution number 3529, a resolution of the city of Red Lodge, Montana, approving and adopting the final budget for fiscal year 2019-2020. And the change is as proposed by the Red Lodge City Mayor and approved by the Red Lodge City Council on August 27, 2019.
second,
Discussion on that amendment.
Yeah, I'm good with that. That's, looks better than, or sounds better than what it says.
Discussion from the public. Roll call.
Cameron,
Yes.
Dimich,
Yes.
Hoffman,
Yes.
Mahan,
yes.
Weimer,
Yes.
Westwood.
Yes.
Back to the original motion.
Question,
Question's been called. Roll call.
Original motion, I seconded, they made it.
Alright, Cameron,
Yes,
Image,
Yes.
Hoffman,
Yes.
Mahan,
Yes,
Weimer,
Yes.
Westwood.
yes.
you got your money.
Okay, we need to look at something. It's 9 o'clock at night.
Mayor, I,
Bonnie's been here since.
I know,
Yeah.
but I do request that we talk about the issuance of the sale of bonds, because that is time sensitive. So I was like.
Could we do that and then
Yes, yes.
reschedule?
yeah, I was gonna move that we move all the discussion items to the next meeting.
Sale of bonds needs.
If we could do the sale of the bonds and then,
Move to approve resolution number 35.
No, just discussion, I just.
Yes,
I just-
I have a question, cause it says action, but
No, I
No,
don't
no, no,
think so,
sorry.
it's moving,
Discussion.
it's just moving.
what questions do you still have open based on everything we've talked about?
Nothing, so,
I know,
the
but we've talked about it several times in the
what,
past.
you wanna explain it to us, Bonnie?